Robert, tell me about how you thought about, okay, this is going to be my third film, is it? That I'm going to make a documentary, not only a documentary, but about my very famous uncle.
Yes, yeah, it's my fourth film, and it was really the sense, since I was little, that the stories that circulated about Monty in the public and the stories that circulated about Monty at home were very different. And I wanted to explore that difference.
My father had always said not to trust the stories about my Uncle Monty. But Monty was Montgomery Clift. There's nothing but stories.
Robert and I had talked about making this film for a number of years. And, you have to have time, you have to have the right conditions. But, I think also we saw our niece and nephews starting to get a little older, and we knew that even for us, like people who we would have wanted to talk to, they were getting older and some people had died, and at a certain point that these people aren't going to be accessible anymore. So I don't know if it was any one thing, but we thought we have to do this now before we can't anymore.
Did you know the amount of information that you're going to come across, or you didn't know about that?
No, well, we knew there was a lot of boxes, but we didn't know there was going to be the number of boxes that we ended up discovering. We had no idea what was going to be in those boxes. We didn't know if they were all going to be covered with mold. I mean, some of them were kept in an attic in humid towns for decades, right? So we really had no idea. So we came across these boxes, and my father recorded everything.
Hi, old man. Hello. Hi.
Everything from my brother's first sneeze to random things on television. But some of them were phone conversations with Monty, my grandmother, other members in the family, biographers. And my first response was like, wow, this is my father. He died when I was 13. So I get to listen to him again.
Yeah. And is that the reason you have a co-director, because of the amount of information, or how did Hillary come into the picture?
Because she's a brilliant filmmaker, and the film would be better with her. Yeah, that's the easiest, and that's the truth.
It is very difficult to decide what goes in and what does not when you're making a film like this, especially when you have as many materials as we had. It was really a matter of figuring out what is our story and sticking as close to that as we possibly could. I think that the longest version of the film that we had was probably 2 hours and 15 minutes, and that was when it was still pretty loose, and then it got down to 90. Some films go for 4 hours, and then you have to cut them down to 90. So, I think that we were pretty tight in making our decisions, but there are all kinds of stories that we couldn't include because they just took us too far off the path. So it's really listening to the materials and making sure that those materials are what's allowed to speak in the film. And we got to hear Monty speak.
What did you find out about your uncle that you didn't know by making this film?
That everyone always told me he had a sense of humor. And that goes against his public image, what people normally say about him. But I never got to experience it and the type of humor it is. So he also recorded phone calls, but also in the calls with my father, he jokes about things. And so there's access to a part of his life and outlook that I never would have had access to prior to that.
And where do you think now Montgomery Clift belongs in the hierarchy or the history of cinema?
Oh, Monty has got to be up there in the history of cinema. Not just because of how he worked at the time. Independently. He wouldn't sign contracts. That was such an unheard of thing for somebody that early in his career. But even now, if you look at actors who we cherish and really appreciate their work, you can trace that lineage right back to Monty. He's way up there.
He wasn't anything like people think he was.
It is a tragic story.
I never found that to be true. there are accusations that are so absolutely flagrantly lies.
Do you think that today's current actors, like, rising actors, like the young ones, know who Montgomery Clift is, and or what they know about him?
That's a great question. I guess I can't really answer that comprehensively. I would say that it depends on where they are in the rising part, maybe. I do know that I've spoken to a number of actors that where their acting teachers show, like Judgment at Nuremberg in particular, because it's a very lengthy performance that he gives, and they see it as this masterful performance. And you can go to the script and watch his performance, and he's holding the screen for, I think, 15, 16 minutes. So people know him, actors know him more than anyone.
I certainly hope that for upcoming actors or up-and-coming actors that they will go revisit Monty's work if they see this film. They only get a taste in our film of the labor and the thought that went into everything. But if you go look back at his films, you see someone who feels very modern for the films that he's in. So there's a lot to be learned. I really hope that people go revisit his body of work.